Where do patients and their families turn when standard treatments for their cancers or serious blood disorders fail? For these patients, medicines, chemotherapies, radiation, and other treatments may no longer work. In some cases, their only hope for a cure lies in a blood or marrow transplant, and they turn for help to a remarkable organization called Be the Match. Please stay tuned. I first met Gilbert Martinez at the Volunteers Day in Cupertino, California. I was working at the booth for The Better Part, and he was at the Be the Match booth. I was particularly interested in visiting him as my husband has had a stem cell transplant after being matched with a donor by Be the Match. Gilbert is the community engagement representative for the Western region for Be the Match. He graduated from University of the Pacific and currently is working toward his MA at the University of San Francisco. He has been with Be the Match since 2016 and has been registered to be a donor since 2009. Welcome, Gilbert. It's so nice to have you here.
No, thank you for having me here. I'm very excited.
Great. You know, people who work for a nonprofit organization like Be the Match often have a very particular reason for doing so. Gilbert, what's your reason?
You know, growing up, I used to hear a lot about my grandfather and a lot of great stories from my older brothers, but I never had the chance to meet him. He had passed away from leukemia years before I was born here. The thing with it was, though, is my family had no idea that he had passed away from leukemia. They thought it was pneumonia that had taken him out. And it wasn't years later until my brother finally explained to my mom that it was actually cancer.
I see.
So during that time, you know, still in high school, really mulling my options of what I wanted to do in life. And I started thinking about that. But right around that time, I had also had two cousins who unfortunately were not able to find matches either, who passed away. It became clear to me at that point that I had to do something. I had to be a part of a cure, part of something that could help other individuals, such as, you know, my cousins and my grandfather who passed away.
So it's personal.
For me, it's very personal. And now that I'm here with Be the Match and been here for, you know, a good amount of time now, I don't see myself doing anything else. It's probably the greatest job I've ever had in my life.
You know, I know you're really passionate about your job. You know, whenever I talk to you, I'm always struck by that. How do you view your job?
The first thing I actually mention to anyone is, you know, I do view my job, it is a career, it is a profession. But for me, it's really a life calling. It's really something that I felt after everything that I've accomplished in my life, everything that I had gone through universities. I felt like I've always wanted to do something in the public health realm, but still be in the nonprofit profit world. So for that reason alone, when I really fell into Be the Match, you know, I just really found it as being my calling in life to be the representative.
Great, a perfect match.
Exactly.
Now, people are familiar with organ transplants. You know, a kidney is transplanted or lungs are transplanted. But what is a blood or a marrow transplant? What gets transplanted and what systems are being replaced?
Right. We hear a lot about this when we talk about bone marrow transplants. They're like, oh yeah, I'm part of the registry already. I did it at the DMV. I got that little pink sticker. And we're like, that's great. It's an organ transplant, which is just as important. But what we do is we take what's pretty much the middle ground, right between the donation of blood and something not as permanent as a donation of an organ. So in between is bone marrow. Everyone has bone marrow in their body. It's what generates their cell. It's a cell manufacturing portion of your body. So it generates your red blood cells, your T cells, your B cells, your white cells, everything that you have in your body. So when someone has a blood disorder, blood cancer, and they need new bone marrow, is because we need to restart their entire immune system. So the system that gets replaced is exactly we talk about bone marrow, and we say, yeah, you're getting bone marrow transplant, but what you're really getting is a completely new immune system. Right now, currently in Las Vegas, because we have a patient there with sickle cell anemia,
I see.
she was unaware that a bone marrow transplant could actually help her. So when our campaigns come around to those types of areas, we definitely focus heavily on really registering everyone and anyone we can in their ethnic group, because the chances are you're probably going to match with someone, more than likely with someone who has the same immune system or has been exposed to the same immune system types that you'd have.
Right, right. Now, there are a lot of treatments for some of these cancers and diseases. When would a transplant be considered?
So while a transplant is very effective at curing multiple different types of disorders,
Right.
it is usually reserved for the last, the absolute last opportunity, the last, would you say, the final step really for treatment. The reason being is, well, it is effective. It's also very difficult to find matches for individuals.
I see.
We would absolutely oppose providing false hope to an individual, telling them we could cure your cancer, could clear your blood disorder with a match, check our registry, and unfortunately we might not have a match for them.
I see.
And
I know that sounds very difficult, because you're essentially saying that there are a lot of diseases that we know that there could be a cure, but we really can't cure that many people because we don't have enough donors for that individual who would match, right?
correct. So hypothetically speaking, we should be able to cure just about every type of blood cancer or blood disorder that's out there,
Wow,
if we had enough people to register.
really?
So for us,
That's amazing.
yes, for us currently, the registry is incomplete because we haven't found matches for everyone.
Right.
So we definitely have a high focus on registering individuals, but not only just registering individuals, but registering committed individuals. So when they do receive that call, they are ready to potentially save someone's life.
Right,
So-
right. Now, I know in my husband's case, we had to go outside of the U.S. Because there wasn't a match in the national database here. What other countries have databases for possible donors?
Right, so while we are the world's largest registry, there is about 16 other registries worldwide that we work with and partner with. The most prominent one being Germany. They're the second largest registry with 7 million individuals registered to it. They are a very great ally of us, and you can see them around here as well in the States. The other large registries that we have are the Queen's Registry in England. We have Canada's registry.
I see.
Mexico just actually started building up their registry as well, with Be the Match in Mexico, expanding down there. The most troubling ones we see, though, is that while there are a lot of registries that are being developed, in particular cases where we're looking for matches for our Asian Pacific Islander community, our Asian community, mainland Asian communities, there's only 3 registries in all of Asia.
Oh, really?
Yes, there's only 3.
So
It's just
what are those?
China, Japan, and Taiwan are the only 3 registries in the
I
entire
see.
region.
I see.
And that expands all the way, past Russia, all the Middle East. None of that is included in the Asian registry.
So the people with ethnic roots to those places at least will have a slightly better chance of finding a match.
Correct.
Right.
So for a lot of our patients who are, of Germanic descent, there's roughly about a 90% chance we're going to find a match for them.
Wow.
Versus someone who might be, if we stick just to the Caucasians alone, someone who might be from Scandinavian descent, we're probably looking closer to about a 45, 46%. But that's just because the second largest registry is Germany. So of course we have a larger a pool of Germanic DNA that could be available for donors.
I'm beginning to understand why your job is so important here. Well, now who contacts Be the Match, when transplant is indicated, and I know in a lot of cases it's indicated because all the other treatments are starting to fail, So you're at the stage where you do need a transplant. So how do you get contacted?
So we get contacted multiple ways. Some of the more non-traditional ways is we actually run into patients. Very similar how we just ran into you at the volunteer fest, the volunteer booth.
Right.
We do have patients who randomly show up because, again, they're unaware that a bone marrow transplant is a viable option for them.
Right.
So they find out, they contact us. Be the Match has a really great patient services program. And then we get them into treatment options at a local, or as close as we can to their local transplant facility. The other methods we get are, more traditional is physicians, the hospital, the transplant centers will notify Be the Match that they have a patient who has a blood disorder or blood cancer that requires a bone marrow transplant.
Right.
In which case they get their HLA typing.
Wow.
Once we get their HLA typing, they just ask us to look through our database.
Right.
And us being as big as we are, we just search our database, and if we have a match, we'll let them know. If we don't, we let them know that we're still working on finding that match.
Now, would a patient sometimes go about looking more aggressively for a donor, for a blood or marrow transplant on his own?
Yes, definitely. We do see that a lot. Actually, a lot of the patients that come towards us after they've been educated by us, letting them know that they're probably going to match with someone in their own ethnic group, and they're going to match with someone in their region, in their area, they predominantly will start campaigning to find their own match as well.
Yes, I've seen campaigns like that,
Yes, absolutely. We run those campaigns very often. I know we'll talk about it later, but even the person listed on this board right behind us, he's from the Salinas County region, and he's looking for a match. And
I see.
we do personalized campaigns for individuals when they come up and ask us for it, because
I see.
They're going to know their community a whole lot better. And not to mention, when we start thinking about who they're going to match, you're only going to match 30% of the time with someone in your own family.
Only 30% of the time?
Correct. Unless you're identical twins, there's only a 30% chance
that you'll match with usually a sibling, right?
Yes. So 70% of the time you are depending on a complete stranger.
Right. And a parent is not a good match, right?
Correct, because you receive half of your genetic material from one parent and half from the other. It is physically impossible to
get
an identical match. They can be a potential haploid match, which means they're 50% of the genetic material is similar. And while those treatments can be effective, we still continue to search for their perfect match.
I see. You had an interesting story, the story about Bruno. Could you tell us about that?
Yes, Bruno Lara was one of the first patients that I have ever had the pleasure of working with. He was only 6 months old when he was diagnosed with HLH, which is an incredibly rare blood disorder. And HLH just stands for hemophagocytic lymphohistiocytosis, which is, yes, very much, which is a disorder of the T cells. Your T cells in your body is what goes in and destroys cancerous cells. There's two different types of white cells. There's T cells and B cells. B cells are your immune system. They're the ones that create antibodies, and your T cells are what goes in. They're called killer T cells because they destroy cancer. So when that doesn't function correctly, you get HLH. So for Bruno, it was very difficult to find a match for him. He's a 6-month-old baby. We were scrambling really hard. The family was really concerned, really worried. But we did a joint campaign with the parents, with the family to date. And I did just check these figures yesterday. And with his online code, 3,500 people have registered on his behalf.
Oh.
Out of those 3,500 people, 6 people have gone on to donate to different individuals.
Oh my gosh.
So,
so he's helped a lot of people already.
Has.
Well, that's wonderful. Well, I hope you find someone for him.
So he received a haploid match for now. He just turned 1 2 days ago. He's looking to do very well. His cell counts are high. But just like we've mentioned before, his haploid treatment is working, but we're still actively searching for a perfect match in the event that he might ever need one again.
I see. I see. Now, who are the ideal candidates to be donors? Who are you looking for?
Ideally, 18 to 44 is what we would like. Age group, male, female, really doesn't matter. But we would like the 18 to 44, typically because your cell metabolism is still relatively high. Most individuals are still very active.
I see.
And you start seeing that even the DNA replicase, the way your DNA regenerates itself, is still very healthy. That being said, we also would like more ethnically diverse individuals for the sole purpose that, again, once a patient who's Hispanic descent, of API descent, they're going to require that type of match for it. However, I do always tell people, just because you don't fall into that 18 to 44 group doesn't mean you can't be a hero and still donate. There's people who are definitely 45, 46, 47 who are a lot healthier than some 20-year-olds today.
I see.
But we do try to stick to that. 61 is the absolute cut, the cutoff date. Once you turn 62, you're no longer eligible to donate via Be the Match. You're still eligible to donate to a sibling, but not to a random stranger who needs your support, unfortunately.
Now, we talk so much about these matches, and they're ranked, I know, up to 10. Can you tell us about HLA matching?
Yes, so your HLA, which stands for your human leukocyte antigens, which is just a fancy way of saying your immune system, are these markers in your DNA. These markers in your DNA tell the body what exactly is supposed to be in there and what it isn't, and then it releases your immune system, your cells, your T cells and your B cells again, to combat against whatever it shouldn't be, foreign objects inside your body. So when we look at that, the one thing I like to make a stark comparison to is there's 8 different blood types, and one's a universal donor and one's a universal recipient, which is great. That means we can transfer blood a whole lot faster. Now, when we look for HLA typings, which is what we look for, there's over 42 trillion variations of it. So there's there's an outstanding amount of available different permutations of your HLA typing than there are people in this, people currently living. So when we do find a match, yes, you're 1 in 30 million in our registry, but you're also, 2 out of 42 trillion who are able to be suitable matches. So, if we find the perfect match, which we call a 10 out of 10 match, that's ideal. The chances of them recovering are a lot higher. Their recovery time is going to be a lot faster. The chance of remission are a lot lower. It also prevents the possibility of graft versus host disease. Oh,
yeah, that's a very serious disease afterwards. What exactly is it?
So grafting versus host disease, it is a fatal disease if not treated correctly. Is a disease that happens when the cells that are now inserted into the new host's body are healthy and they're working properly to eliminate what's foreign inside of their body. Now, the only problem with that is the cells are still programmed with the other person's genetic makeup and their genetic blueprint of what is and what isn't supposed to be there. So what eventually happens is the cells not only obliterate the cancer, but they start going after the kidneys, liver, pancreas, and they can develop serious complications, which eventually are fatal. So that's very, very important why we find perfect matches.
Yeah, so the higher the better.
Correct.
Now, I know when my husband was matched with someone, it was only a 9 out of 10 match. So is there a borderline that you do not go below?
Yes. Outside of haploid treatment, which is only half as haploid would imply, we would only go as low as 7 out of 10 match. And even then, we would only use that 7 out of 10 match if there's no other viable option. There's no other viable treatment. There's no other cellular therapy that we could use prior to using that, just because the grafting versus host disease has a higher possibility in that individual.
I see. Could you tell us a little more about what a donor has to do? If I'm thinking of signing up for the registry, but I might be a little fearful. What can you tell me to allay my fears?
The first thing I always tell people is, yes, it is something that people fear. But then I also tell you, why do you fear that? They'll give you an abundance of reasonings for that. You know, oh, I heard it hurts. I heard they pull it from your spine. I saw it on television. You know, stuff like that. And what I tell you is that's all false. We have never extracted bone marrow through the spine.
I see.
We really like to emphasize the fact that it's a pretty pain-free donation process. So for a donor, it starts off at the easiest step is you swab your cheek. All it takes just to find out.
Swab your cheek.
Yep.
And that gets
Q-tip.
you in the database.
It gets into the database. It lets us find out what your HLH typing, sorry, your HLA typing is. With your HLA typing, we can then see if you're a match for someone else. If you are a match and you are that lucky person that, you know, that other person of the 42 trillion.
It's depending on you. Yeah.
Yes, it is always voluntary and it's depending on you, which is why we ask for very committed volunteers to do so. In that case, you just go, you take a quick blood test and a quick physical to make sure you're healthy internally and externally, because there are some incidents, particularly with women where they're pregnant and they're not allowed to donate. You know, they're only 2 months pregnant.
So something happens.
Yeah, in which case they're not allowed to donate.
Right.
And those are situations, you know, it's understandable. But
so let's divide it up into a stem, you know, a blood donation versus a marrow. So what happens with the blood donation?
Perfect. So either donation, you're going to go to that first step, which is the blood testing.
Right.
From there, they will decide whether you're going to donate blood or you're going to donate direct bone marrow. If you donate blood, what happens is for the next 4 to 6 weeks, you're going to take phone calls, about 30-minute phone calls a week, just to give you the update of your patient, because the patient's treatment's got to align with your preparation for the donation.
Right.
Then 5 days prior to the donation, you'll receive Neupogen shots. And it increases just your stem cells in your body. So that way we don't have any issues with low iron or anemia or minimum weight or some of the things that would normally disqualify you from donating blood. Yep, just a shot. They will be administered by your local, you know, clinic wherever you want them. There's even some cases where the individual just asks if they can send them the shots, and then the parents administrate them for them. It's a very simple procedure. In which case you then show up to the hospital the day before. The day of. You're gonna sit on a chair, watch movies. They're gonna put an IV in your arm. It draws out your blood. Then it goes through an apheresis process, which is again another fancy word of saying a machine that spins, and it spins out your stem cells from your plasma.
So it's extracted out.
Exactly. It separates the two, and then we have another IV in your other arm, and it's pumping your blood right back into you.
So anything that's not used
comes right back to you.
Okay.
And we just repeat the cycle till we collect enough stem cells.
Okay.
Typically about a baggie, that big, not very much when people really look at it. The process itself does take about 4 hours. The biggest discomfort I hear from it is the fact that individuals have to use the restroom because we're also pumping fluids to prevent cramping into their body, which kind of what delays the process itself. But afterwards, your recovery time is typically a day. No one ever misses work from that procedure.
Okay, well that sounds pretty simple for blood transplants. But what about a bone marrow?
Right. So when we get direct bone marrow aspiration, and we only do this 20% of the time.
I see.
Typically only for pediatrics, because in infants, stem cells are already not functioning the way they're supposed to. We don't think that new stem cells are going to all of a sudden restart their system. So they require direct bone marrow, an experienced immune system, I guess you could say.
I see.
So what happens then is there is no Neupogen. There is no shots. You do still have the 4 to 6 weeks of phone calls to give you the updates of your patient to prepare yourself for that. And then you show up to the hospital the day of. Your doctor greets you. They put an IV in your arm. You count from 100 to 0. You make it to about 96. You take a nap. From there, medical professionals will turn you to your side. And then we use a needle that actually goes into a pore that's already in your hip. So there's no breaking, there's no drilling, there's no new holes made, no nothing. And you can actually feel where these holes are if you ever touch your back and feel where 2 dimples are. Those are exactly where the extraction process goes.
You mean I already have those holes?
They're already there, so he extracts it out. So that procedure is roughly about 30 minutes long. So you wake up, and the sensation that people typically describe afterwards is general soreness from your waist down. One of the current campaigns that me and another patient are currently running It's called It Hurts Less Than. We're asking a lot of these donors what hurt more than a bone marrow transplant when you donated. The most common ones we hear is, oh, squatting at the gym was a lot more painful than donating bone marrow, or doing Zumba class or spin class. It really just...
When you think about the great benefit it is for the patient, you know, it's hardly worth, you know, worrying about, right?
Exactly, and people always tell us that, and they're, you know, even though we explain, sometimes they're still a little nervous, you know, and then afterwards they're like, I can't believe this is what I was scared of.
Wow.
And the great thing about that is the recovery time for that as well, because we go to a hole that's already existing. We're not damaging the hip any more than that. It's typically about 4 to 5 days. For 3 days, you are going to feel very sore. Like I said, again, you just squatted at the gym or some kind of physical activity using your legs. You'll be generally sore. Seldomly do people miss work, but those who require heavy activity, police officers, fire department, they will be asked to take the days off. The cool thing is, and I always like to mention this, is that Be the Match does pay for the days off that you take.
Right.
You just saved someone's life. We don't want to displace you by, you know, missing opportunities in your work.
Actually, Be the Match pays for almost all the expenses for a donor, doesn't it?
We actually pay for 100% of the donor's side. That includes, you know, the hotel that the donor has to stay in the night before, so we can avoid like traffic jams or any of that stuff, because it is on a tight schedule.
Right.
Rental cars, foods. We've paid babysitters because people are parents and they donate. The point is that, you know, Be the Match understands the big commitment someone is doing when they're saving someone's life like that. And we don't want to displace your life while you're trying to save someone else's. So yeah, Be the Match covers everything from travel to the actual procedures to the actual process of it all.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being with us today. We learned an awful lot. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Gilbert, thank you very much for sharing with us today all the wonderful things that Be the Match does. We hope that someone out there listening today may decide to be a donor, or, having had his questions answered, decide to proceed with a bone marrow or stem cell transplant. An update. This year, my husband is celebrating 6 years post a stem cell transplant. He's been cured of a rare and devastating cancer. We thank you for joining us today and hope to see you next week on The Better Part.
Lean on me when you're not strong, and I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on, for it won't be long till I'm gonna need somebody to lean